So I have a little bit of an experiment here, and what I'm doing is I am taking this R250 that normally has two 3.5-inch drives, and what I want to do is I want to modify each one of these bays so we can actually put two 2.5-inch drives in a 3.5-inch slot. Normally they have converters for these, but there's a little bit of work that needs to be done on this Dell R250 to be able to make this happen. So first is one of the trays, and normally there will be a single 3.5-inch drive in here. So you can see what I've done is I've actually got an adapter, 3.5 to 2.5 adapter from Corsair. You can get these on Amazon. And I've got two 2.5-inch drives that I've actually mounted inside of this Dell 3.5-inch removable bay. So that's all done. Now what I need to do, of course, I'll need to get a data connection in here, and I also need to get a power connection. The case, which I've already done, so you'll see here, and I'll show you how I did this, is there's a 6-pin power connector right here in the Dell. So that 6-pin power connector doesn't use conventional standard PCIe power connections. So what you need to do is basically look at the schematic, and what I ended up doing here is I took a standard daisy-chained SATA power connector right here and cut those connectors back, and then I soldered them to each corresponding connector on the chassis. Now there's one little catch here. You'll notice there's a white wire right here. When you peel back the wrapped connector, you'll notice this white connector actually goes to a ground. And as a result, that needs to be connected when you solder the connections together, which I did here. So those two are actually ground connections and the other ones are power. Once you have that, you heat shrink them, solder them, all that's good. You tuck them in here. You then have proper power connections that you can mount to your individual SATA drives for the R250. So there's a couple things with this chassis. Why did I do this? Because I didn't want to use the onboard SATA controller, normal communications in a node. I wanted to put a PERC in here, which is a add-in Dell PERC card that allows you to have advanced RAID capabilities. And then I wanted to go ahead and add that connection to the back plane here. Now what's nice about this, pull this out so you can see it, is I put right here the 755 RAID card in here, and you'll notice here I've actually got a SlimSAS 8X connector. There's two of those on here. Now, this cable is customized. You can get them on Amazon. That's a SlimSAS 8X connector. Put that in there for now. And then that SlimSAS connector then goes to standard SATA connectors that I'm going to use to attach to that bay right there. And then I'm also going to use these power connections to be able to do that. Okay, so what I ended up doing is I stripped this back, and that way I've got enough room to run these into each one of these bays. One of the issues that I have, power connectors aren't really long enough here. So what I ended up doing is I cut some wires back here, and then I stripped out larger or longer wires that I use to effectively lengthen the connector so I can connect it into SATA power that I then soldered into this Dell 6-pin connector here. So how do I end up doing that? Well, there's a couple different ways to accomplish that. What I need to do is I need an extended SATA power connector here. I got this off Amazon. You'll notice it's got two reds right here. It's got several blacks, and then it's got a couple of yellow connectors, right? These for each corresponding power. So what I want to do basically is I want to extend this, right? So when I do that, I'm going to go ahead. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the yellow. I'm going to go ahead and strip those back. Now what I need to do is extend that. So I'm going to go ahead and get a couple pieces of cable that I actually cut. This is just standard, I think it's 18 or 20 gauge wire. Nice flexible silicone wire you can get on Amazon. I'm going to go ahead and tie that nice and round so I can put my heat shrink tubing on there. And that's then going to bridge that, and it's going to extend that out. So a couple things I need to do there is I need to get some heat shrink tubing, right, that we're going to use to seal that after I solder it. And I'm just going to use this standard heat shrink here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that in the center. Go ahead and put that off there for the side. Next thing I need to do is turn on my soldering iron. Go ahead and heat that up, let it heat up just for a second. I'm going to go ahead and get my electrical solder, and in this case you can just use any standard electrical solder. This is a lead-free electrical solder that I'll be using once that soldering iron heats up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place my first cable. I'm going to go ahead and tie these two together on each end so it forms into one connection, right? Because they're essentially going to the same power source on each side. It's just split because there's two individual connectors there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take heat shrinks. I'm going to go ahead and put the heat shrinks on just like that. So when you look at the cable, you'll notice there that it actually has two heat shrinks ready to go. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and twist these together. Make sure you twist it several times so you get a nice stable bond. Solder will, of course, solidify that, but you want to make sure you spend some time to get that nice. Do it on this one too. Do that one a little bit. And there we go. It's looking really good. Now let's see with my soldering irons ready here. Let's get in there. Yep, there we go. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to get in here. You want to make sure you have a really good solder joint. And the way I usually do this is I'll let that soldering iron heat up, and then I'll let it heat the cable a bit. And what you want to do is wick that solder right along the edge there. And what that does is it starts to heat the cable up. It takes a second, and it's heating up. All right, looking good. There we go. And got it all. And you'll notice there's a nice solid joint right there. Now we're going to do it on the next one. Same thing. Gonna just let it sit on there for a second. Wick some solder in there to get it nice and hot. And there we go. Nice. Turn my soldering iron off. One of the things I like to do is just trim that down a little bit. If you have any extra wire on there sticking off, and trim that back just a tad. And keep in mind the wire is hot. So, all right, now we're going to push these heat shrinks over. Connector there. I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun and this really quick. So rotate it so you're getting a really nice shrink all the way around. There we go. Same for this side. Very nice. So you can see there, nice bond on both sides. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically repeat that for each one of the sections of wire here. So I'll go ahead and go for the ground next, or one of the grounds rather. There's several on here. Love the silicone wire. Just so easy to work with. It's very flexible. I'm going to cut another piece of heat shrink back. There we go, ready now. I'm going to go ahead and turn that soldering iron back on. Let it heat up for a second. Almost there. Push up against the wire. That way it's getting some heat conduction there. There we go. And of course you want to do it away from your heat shrink because you don't want your soldering iron shrinking up your cable. It's not. Looking good. Push this one over here. There. So we got two of them done there. We'll keep working our way through it. Start that soldering iron up now. If you really want to get crazy, you can color code everything. I don't really care because I know our stuff's going, and I don't really intend to open this chassis up too much once I get these drives in there. By the way, this is a lab server, and just want to go ahead and add that disclaimer in here. This will void any warranty that you might have. So I highly suggest you don't do this if you want to maintain a warranty. But I assure you it does work, and I will show that. One thing I do like about this silicone wire, guys, is that it doesn't burn very easily, unlike some of the other cheaper wire. So you can get it around real high heat. You don't have to worry about it. I use it on vehicles all the time when I'm working on engines and stuff. It doesn't burn. Really good stuff. You really got to get it hot to do that. All right, got that bond. Got a little bit of more solder on that one than I like. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that back a little bit. There we go. Push that up there. Push this guy up here. Get that. More to go. Go ahead and cut the last one. Same procedure. Always hold the cable when you're stripping it too, because you don't want it to break outside of that connector. That would not be good. It's being stubborn. There we go. Let's twist those together. Oh man, looks like I need a little more wire. Measure that back here. Make sure I don't like incorrect lengths. Soldering iron heating up. Let me get my heat shrink on there. Awesome. And it goes without saying, don't make sure there's no AC power to this server. It's completely unplugged. That's kind of a common sense thing, but never know nowadays, right? All right, let's go here. Guys, use a good quality solder too. There's a lot of crap out there. Some of the Wellington stuff over at Lowe's is pretty good. Even stuff you get off Amazon. Just get a higher grade solder. It's not worth the trouble if it's junk. You want a good bond here. I generally don't have to use too much flux on this, and you get a solder with flux in it. If you don't, just add some flux to it, and that way you get a really good connection on that cable. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and push that back and push this back. Let's go ahead and heat it up. And be sure to keep that heat gun away from the other cables. Obviously, this thing gets extremely hot. Doesn't take much. You don't want to burn the heat shrink either. Now, a couple things with the heat shrink. There also is differences, of course, in quality of the heat shrink. You want the double wall stuff. It just tends to work better, but there's also stuff with adhesive in it, and that way it creates a watertight kind of bond. Not saying this is going to be submerged, but I generally don't like gaps here, and I do like it to be glued in the end. And what it does, you can see it creates just a nice tight bond all the way around. Now there's my cable right there. Lengths are just a little bit off, but it's not too bad. And what we're going to need to do now is we need to get these connectors into this bay over here. There we go, that's good enough. You can see I already did one of these. I'm just showing you the second one that I'm doing here, just like that. And I'm going to do the same exact thing for these guys. So with these guys, I want to bring them through the side. There's one, Again, sharp edges, don't cut your data cables, bad. Bring it through the side. There we go, just like that. Now, very carefully, what I want to do now is I want to get these pigtails attached. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the key. There's a key on here, right? So you've got a notch on the bottom here on the left side. We're going to push that in just like that. Same thing on this side. Push it through just like that. You're going to take the slack out. There we go. Now I'm going to do my data connections. Same thing. There's a key on here just like that. And notice on this side, go ahead. It's real tight. So you got to cut a little bit of time with it. There we go. I've got all my connections. I've got two drives in two 3.5 inch drive bays in here with 4 total 2.5 inch SSDs. I've got 4 data connections coming off this SlimSAS connector here. And what I want to do is I want to get this guy back into his home. So it works great. You just have to get the wiring correct. Now that we've got everything in there, I think we're good to go. So we've got our PERC 755 RAID controller in here. We've got our SlimSAS connector, 8X connector here that goes down into a fan out, multiple SATA connectors into the 3.5 inch bays. It's got 4 drives in here. I've got both my SATA power connections that fan out into 4 different SATA connector connections into the drives, and we're pretty much ready to go. Now what I want to do is pop the top onto this guy, just like that. I want to get him back in the rack. Him to a point where I can turn them on. Let's go ahead and push that over there, power it up, make sure it doesn't beep at me or complain. Dell's pretty good about shutting the server down if anything's funky on the power side. I've done a few of these. And you'll know when it works because the Dell will basically fan power up, and if it continues without the green light shutting off here, you're in good shape. What it's doing right now is it's doing a system check. It's powering up, and we are good. Next step, let's make sure the card is recognized within the iDRAC, and then also verify the new drive count. Now I have the Dell R250 ready to go. I'm going to open Mojo and get it imported so we can go ahead and start managing some of the storage. So let's go ahead and open up the console. This will be the admin console where we do all of the imports. So if we go to nodes and discovery under management, you'll notice we don't have that node in here currently. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, there's an authentication profiles area where you store all of the user credentials. I already have that in there for the R250. So we're going to go to scan ranges. We're going to pick the network that it resides on, which is a single -24 network. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then I'm going to do a run discovery. Okay, so what that'll do is it'll do a scan of that -24. Takes about 2 or 3 minutes. And then it's going to come back and it is going to hopefully locate that Dell node, and then we'll import it and start to gather some information on that node. So give it just a second here. Okay, good. So it looks like it imported right here. You can see it shows the discovered node has the IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to select that, and then we're going to do register nodes. Now up here, I'm going to select the authentication profile that matches the credentials that we'll log into the iDRAC with. Then we're going to register. Okay, now you can hear it's registered. And we should see this flip over to an R250 here in just a second once it goes in and starts to gather some of the information and introspect the node. There it goes, Dell PowerEdge R250, shows the IP address, everything's good. Now what we want to do is we want to assign it to our lab pool. Okay, and this lab pool, grouping of resources, whatever you want it to be. In this case, it's just the lab here that we use for all of our testing. So I'm going to go up, I'm going to add the Dell node into that lab pool. And now it's in that pool. So what happens is all the role-based access credentials and the policies that are associated with the pool then get applied to the servers. So now I can see it and I can manage it. If we go up to the top here, we'll now see it here at the bottom, and it says Dell PowerEdge R250, and it shows the service tag and all the associated information. If I click on that, you're going to notice here it gives me a bunch more information, the network interfaces, all the drives that are going to be managing. As you can see, there's 4 drives that I did install into the server. Those are showing up just fine. And then I've got 2 SSDs here that are associated with the BOSS controller. Okay. Now, Mojo does allow RAID creation on both these. So you can do a mirror on the BOSS controller, and then you can also do a RAID set for the PERC 755 controller. It's added here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log in with the account that allows me to manage this. In this case, it's called All-in-One. I'm going to sign in with that. And if we go over to resources, we go to servers, go back down to this, you'll notice everything is in order. Just as it was in the previous screen, see all the drives. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Actions. I'm going to go to Open Virtual Drive Volume Settings. And then we're going to go down to the PERC 755 adapter. And you'll notice here I can select the drives. I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to select all 4 of these drives. I'm going to create a RAID 5. Go here, RAID 5. And I'm going to keep all of these default. Now it does have a BBU, so I can technically do write back, but I'm not going to do that in this one. I'm going to do Create Volume. And then I'm going to go ahead and put yes here. Now, the reason why we have this, of course, is time a RAID is created or disks are modified in the system, we consider that as potentially highly destructive. So we do want to make sure that we have a prompt there and something's not accidentally selected that may negatively impact the system. So hit apply on that. You'll notice here it says request is successfully submitted, but it hasn't done anything yet. And the reason for that is we do everything through an request and approvals process within Mojo. Further prevents accidents from happening on systems inadvertently. If we click on that request, you'll notice here, it pretty much has everything lined up. Shows what it's going to be doing. It's in a pending state, shows all 4 of the disks there. It shows the PERC 755 controller ready to go. And if we hit approve on that, you'll notice right here, it's going to show the workflow immediately after we approve that. It's going to start working its way through the system, okay? So what the first thing it's going to do is it's going to send a request to the iDRAC through Redfish, and then it's going to instruct it to create the volume, and then it's going to make sure the system has that set and it's verified, and then it calls back to Mojo and lets it know that it's effectively done. So it's working through that process now. Now I want to make sure it's kind of doing what it's supposed to be here. So go ahead and log into the iDRAC. And up here at the top, you'll notice it says pending jobs 1, okay, which is perfect. And that should do the period of actually creating the virtual disk in just a moment. And if we open up the console here, the very top, we're going to notice it says system configuration requested by lifecycle controller. That's indicative of it creating the RAID for that volume for the VG controller. Now you know here it's already started the process, task in progress. So we'll give it just a second. Looks like it's pretty much done. I'm going to minimize that console. Now you can see that job is now moved from pending to in progress, and it's going through the completion now. I'm going to go in and go over to storage and just make sure everything looks good. Okay, now virtual disk not quite there yet. It'll be there in just a second. That's still going, which is great. I'm going to go over here, just kind of check back in with it and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. All right, looks pretty good here. We've got a virtual disk now. It shows 1. We're going to click on that. And you can see here virtual disk 239. RAID 5 is currently online. We're going to go back into Mojo. We're going to just have a peek, see what it's saying here. Okay, good. So down here it says on controller 707, it's created that and it's now taking a break. It's going to go ahead and check that and then call back into Mojo. So we should see this completed in Mojo in just a second here. And we can see everything's moved from in progress to completed. So we're looking really good there. Let's check back and it's just completed the process of the creation and it's just completed the workflow. And as you can see here, everything looks good. Let's go ahead and go back into the server, go down to the R250, and all those new drives that I put in should now show a striped with parity set. Indeed, it does right here. So if we go back up into virtual volumes, we go to the 755 controller, you're going to notice 557 gig RAID set that consists of 4 drives and RAID 5 with parity. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good. Now what I want to do is I want to install an operating system on here. So to do that, we already have the RAID 5 set that I just created. I also want to create a mirror on the boss card. There's 2 SATA M.2s on there, and I want to go ahead and mirror those. So if I go up to volume settings and then I go down to the boss S1 controller, and then I add the 2 drives here, and I go to RAID 1, right? I'm going to read ahead, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit create. I'm going to go ahead and do yes here to approve that. And then I'm going to approve the request. And you can see here, it's now started the process. We're going to leave that open. I'm going to go back over to my Dell and see, there we go. There's your pending RAID job right there. You can see it automatically restarted the server with a warm boot. And we should see a configuration dialog come up here in just a second for the RAID creation for that boss controller. Perfect. There's some configuration requested by lifecycle controller dialog, which is again indicative of a RAID creation. We'll go ahead and let it boot. By the way, the R250 and some of the newer Dells, the boot process is much faster than some of the older models. Previously, you'd have to wait here a little while. This tends to be a lot faster. So All right, there it goes. It's going through the HCI configuration, which is essentially creating a RAID 1 across two M.2s on the Boss S1 controller. So let's go ahead and check back. And you can see here now it's gone from pending jobs to in progress jobs. And it's showing that RAID configuration there. Let's go ahead and peek back at the controller, or the console rather. Everything's moving along. Okay, in progress job, RAID 1 configuration is still there. It should be going to completed jobs here in just a second. All right, looks like everything completed. It shows completed jobs 9 there. We're going to go to the storage config area within the iDRAC, and then we're going to take a look at our virtual disks. And it looks like everything's good. There's our RAID 1 on our Boss controller right there. You can see down there, Boss S1. So let's go back into Mojo, see how it looks. Let's go to servers. Let's go down to that Dell server. And then we can see that striped with parity that I created previously is there. And we should see that Boss show up really quick. I'm just going to hit refresh on here. Give it just a second. It has to update that lifecycle controller and it'll populate that field. Just a moment. There it goes. Perfect. And then here, you can see here it shows the background initialization process, which is a great feature that we just added, so you can see exactly where it's at in the RAID creation process. As you can see with the RAID 5, it takes a little while for it to create that parity set. So we're in pretty good shape there. Here's your mirrored Boss controller volume there, and we're now ready for an operating system. So in that case, let's go ahead and get started. Provision OS. We're going to go up here. We're going to go down to Ubuntu 22.04.03, and then we're going to select the default customization template that we have within Mojo. We're going to hit OK on that, and then we're going to go down to management requests, and I am going to approve that provisioning request. And if we go down here, you can see it's starting the process where it's preparing the OS for installation on the server. Let's go back to our Dell and just see kind of what it's doing. There we go. Let's power it off. And you'll see it power the system on here in just a moment. And what it's going to do, it's basically going to power it up. It's going to go through the initial bootstrap, and then it's going to start the PXE installation process. And you should see a message up here in just a second that says it's doing a PXE boot, which is great. There we go. Again, this is completely hands-off. I'm not doing any manual configurations on this server at all. Everything that you see here is done directly through Mojo, and it's 100% automated. So the whole focus of as a product is to eliminate the need for somebody to go into the iDRAC or go into an additional piece of software to manage the server. We want everything done from Mojo, and not only that, but we want it done across multiple different OEMs. Dell is just one. We support HP, Cisco, and Lenovo, and a bunch of others as a Redfish compatible BMC. So we can see here, it's just now going to lifecycle configuration. Now it's going to attempt a PXE boot. Okay, so on this embedded NIC, this LOM, I've got the first port that's connected into my PXE provisioning network. You can see here, it's going through the process. There's the Mojo Platform boot for the Ubuntu install that we have with the custom pre-seed. It's going through loading that, and there it goes. Everything's looking good. It should start Subiquity here in a second and start doing the customized install. So far, so good. There it goes. There's your Subiquity, and it is now doing the pre-seed. So this will usually take a couple minutes, but the point is it goes through, does this, it fills in all of the within that pre-seed, and it installs Ubuntu to your exact specification. Now, what's kind of nice about this is if we go ahead and minimize that, and then we go back into Mojo, we go to provisioning here, we have a list of all of the operating systems that we've effectively imported into Mojo. Okay, what's really nice about this is you can go into any one of these. In this case, it'd be Ubuntu, and we go to templates. You'll notice here at the very bottom, here's the template that we have that's installed as part of the process, right? And you go in, you can actually alter this pre-seed in any way you want. If you have a highly customized kickstart or pre-seed where you need to do a bunch of stuff in there, you simply go into Mojo, you add it in here, you edit and close it, and then you boot it up through PXE, and it pretty much executes everything that you've put in there. So we make the process of editing kickstarts and pre-seeds extremely easy. Same thing for other operating systems like FreeBSD. This is one that you don't see very in terms of customized auto install approach, but we now have that working fully within Mojo, where you can go in and set up your own automated install here to exact specification and install FreeBSD all the way up to version 14 with EFI now as well. All right, perfect. So let's go back into servers. Just want to show something really quick where it says where it has this Dell system we've been working on, this R250, you'll notice over here you've got a status where it shows it as in deployment, okay? Now what we did in Mojo is we want to make sure, because it is designed as a tool that maintains chain of custody over all the nodes, we wanted to make sure that if there's a workload that's placed in production on the server and you do not want that touched and you only want certain groups to work on it, it will put the server into active deployment status and it will lock that server in that active deployment status until you actually go through up here and you see the deployment and you decommission the node, okay? Now what's nice about this, let's say you want to decommission that node, it's going from production into a dev team and you want to make sure it's decommissioned and back into the pool as an available resource they can use, but you also want to make sure that it is sanitized, okay? So what we've done now is you go to wipe file systems, that'll actually run a standard zero pass over all the drives, right? And clear off all the drives on the system, and it'll basically turn that system back into a server that can be consumed by another team, okay? So let's go back and I'll show that towards the end so you can see that. But if we go back into the console and we look, it's almost done here. Looks like it's already installed OpenSSH server. It's wrapping things up. Let's wait a couple minutes for that to finish. Yeah, but we the whole purpose of Mojo is people to have more control and more security over their assets. When you have a bunch of teams in the organization touching things, sometimes it's very hard to determine who's using what, and also making sure that resources aren't arbitrarily destroyed if they're in some type of production setting. So the Mojo role-based access controls and the policies, and then the approval engine that we have here offers essentially 3 layers of protection against that type of activity. So as a system administrator, you just have much higher level control and confidence systems are being used for a specific purpose. And you don't have any bad actors or in the system with people using things they shouldn't. All right, let's go back in there. Almost done. Give it another second here. Now, one other cool thing I want to mention in here is you can actually go into Mojo and you can also update the firmware. Okay, so we have firmware update capability here. I don't have any images loading in at this moment, but what you would essentially do, if you go to our Discourse site, support.metify.io, it tells you how to port different firmwares within Mojo. And you can basically mobilize those firmwares for both BIOS and BMC within the system. If you want to take, let's say, iDRAC up from version 6 to version 7, you do that. It would schedule a job just like we did with provisioning, and then it would allow you to update that firmware. Now, you can do that on one system. You can do it on bulk systems. We pretty much allow that through the standard UI or the API here. Another cool thing is on the BIOS settings side, if you have common settings that you're consistently changing, let's say you have a bunch of servers and you want to make sure SRLV is enabled, you would put that in here and customize for quick changes. But you can also go in here and let's just show you kind of how it works. You would go ahead, the entries in here that you'd want across multiple different systems. So let's say you want to make sure VT-D, VT-X is enabled on all the systems. You would put that in here, add that entry, and then hit OK. And then that would create a job, and then that would update the BIOS on all of those systems in your organization. So a lot of control there as it goes for BIOS settings. All right, looks like it rebooted. So we're in pretty good shape. So let's go ahead and let it finish here, and then we should have hopefully a prompt that allows us to log into the Ubuntu instance. Again, I have not touched one single thing outside of Mojo on these servers. Everything has been done in a fully automated approach directly from Mojo. Now, the way these servers work is when you install something through EFI, it's going to add that EFI entry. It's going to put it all the way up on the top of the list, and it's going to boot that. So normally it'll just put that at the top. You don't have to do any special boot order stuff. And you can see there, it shows it booting from the RAID controller slot 2, which is the BOSS S2 or S1 controller rather. And it's not booting the Ubuntu footprint on that specific controller. And there we go. Boom, we are done. We've got our standard Ubuntu install all finished up. Everything's done according to that pre-seed, and we can call that server effectively provisioned. So So what I've done in this specific time is I've created 2 different VGs. One that's a stripe parity RAID 5 VG, another one that is a VG on the Boss S1 controller for preparation of install of Ubuntu. And then I went through and I installed Ubuntu with a custom pre-seed and I've done all that within the Mojo console solely without having to touch the server at all, which is fantastic. So if we go back into the server, you'll notice here, it's still showing the background initialization, which is good. So we still have that RAID 5 kind of cooking. Now let's say we want to decommission this deployment. We want to add this in server back into the pool. Okay. We're going to go to deployment and then we're going to go decommission. And again, I don't want to wipe right now. I just want to show you kind of how this works, but you can do there. We're going to hit OK. We're going to go ahead and approve that decommission request. There we go. And it's going to give us kind of like a status here, what it's doing. Load off. And that server should now be ready for somebody else to use it. Indeed it is. It shows it is fully available. So that's it. I mean, there's a ton more stuff in Mojo. Kind of want to go over all the steps, creating RAID, virtual disks, installing a basic operating system, then go over some role-based access controls and some pools and discovery stuff. There'll be other sessions where I go into Mojo a little bit deeper. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out to me at ian@metify.io or just visit our support.metify.io discourse site and feel free to leave a comment there or just give Mojo a try. We've got a free 30-day trial. You can kick it up. It's just essentially very easily containerized install that doesn't take too much to get online. And you can start running and start testing against some PowerEdge servers or some HP servers, whatever Redfish server you would effectively like. That's it for now. Thanks. Bye.